All right, welcome to lab number 3 on the admin console. In this lab, you're going to learn how to start the admin server and log into the admin console using your browser. So let's go ahead and open up a terminal window. The first thing we need to do is we need to start the admin server. Now, we're going to start the admin server for the demo domain that we created in the previous lab. So let's go ahead and navigate to the Udemy lab home directory that we created, and go into domains and go into the demo domain directory. So the domain home for demo domain has a bin directory in it. So if we do a listing in here, you should see a bin directory. And inside that will be a list of all the startup and shutdown scripts for WebLogic. So the one that we need to start the admin server is the startweblogic.sh. Let's go ahead and run that. Now, if you're on Windows, this will be startweblogic.cmd most likely. But the syntax is exactly the same. So make sure if you're in Windows, you're in a command prompt, that you've opened up a command window and that you execute the script. Don't run the Start WebLogic script from Windows Explorer. If you do that and WebLogic fails to start or shuts down, you will never know why unless you go look at the log files. Because as soon as that process exits, it will close the command window. So it's best if you can open up a command prompt first and then run the script. Okay, so the first thing, you'll know that the admin server is running when you see this statement down here. Notice the very last bit where it says server state changed to running. That means that this server, this admin server, is up and running. Some other important information. Let me just make this a little bit bigger so you can see it at home. Some other important information looking at the output here. You can see that the state of the server changes. So this log entry right here says the state changed from to starting, which means the server is starting. Then the next state, the server turns to standby, and then to admin, then to resuming, and finally to running. Each one of these states means something within WebLogic. For instance, in the admin state, the admin server will only respond to admin requests. It will not respond to any application requests. So some other important information are these channel messages. And these channel messages define the listen address and port that the server is listening on. So you can look at this output and see very quickly what listen address that WebLogic's bound to and what port number it's listening on. So in this case, when we created this domain, we left the listen address blank, which means WebLogic's going to bind to any available network address on that network card. And so in this case, we got 127.0.0.1, port 7001. And you can see down here the message, the host name localhost maps to multiple IP addresses. So there's a bunch of networking information here. You can see lastly, the channel, the default network channel maps to the IP address, the local IP address of my machine. One other last piece of important information is this message here. This started WebLogic server administration server for demo domain running in development mode. So this message tells you what mode WebLogic is running in. And as I mentioned earlier, there's two modes that a domain can be created in. One is development mode and one is production mode. And the big difference between development and production is that in production mode, the production mode is a little more secure in that any changes to the domain have to go through what they call a change control system or the change center system. What that means is I actually have to obtain an edit session, an exclusive rights to edit domain first before I can make any changes. And once I'm done with those changes, I have to save them and then activate those changes. Whereas in development mode, any change that I make in the admin console or through WebLogic scripting tool is automatically activated in the domain. And somebody else can connect to that domain in development mode and make changes as well. So there's a chance that you could stomp on somebody else's work or they can stomp on your work. In production mode, only one person can be making changes at one time. Okay, so once the server is running, go ahead and open up your browser. once your browsers open up, let's log into the admin console, and we'll do that. The URL you can see here, I've got all my browsing history. The URL for the admin server, the admin console, is going to be the IP address of your machine where the admin server is running, colon, the listen port, which is 7001, / console. Console is the default URL, URN for the admin console application. So the first time you run this, it's going to say deploying application, deploying the console application. And that only happens the first time you start up your WebLogic domain. Anytime you access the console after that, the application's already deployed, so you will not see that message. So go ahead and log into the console using the WebLogic 123 admin account we created when we created the domain. Okay, so this is it. This is the main page of the admin console. There's a lot going on here. On the left-hand side, you can see that we have some boxes, widgets. Let's call them widgets for now. And then in the center of the screen, we have the home page, or the center. I call it the main part of the console. I don't know if there's a technical term for it, but let's call it the main window. And then on top, we have navigation, menu, log out, record, help, and search. So let's go over these one by one at a very high level. So the change center is what keeps track of all the changes that have been made to a domain. It also serves as a check control system if production mode has been enabled. So as I mentioned earlier, if your domain was created in production mode, and if you need to make a change to the domain, there would actually be a button here under View Changes and Restarts that would ask you to essentially perform what they call a lock and edit. So you lock the domain, you obtain an exclusive lock to edit that domain. And once you have that lock, nobody else can make any changes to the domain. And once you've made changes, you must save those and release the lock. And that essentially activates those changes within the domain. Now, if you've made changes within the domain, you can actually go ahead and click on this, View Changes and Restarts, and see what changes are pending, what changes you have made. Now, certain changes that you make via the console or via WebLogic scripting tool require a restart of the domain, but not all changes do. So if I create a WebLogic managed server, I don't need to restart the domain. However, if I create a cluster and add servers to that cluster or remove servers from the cluster, it may require a restart. And you can see, just leaning forward, the restart checklist is here, and you can see if there are any pending restart requests in this table. Okay, so moving on, another important part, and this is the main navigation portion of the admin console. It's this domain structure widget. This domain structure widget contains a hierarchy of all the resources and configuration components within WebLogic. You can see here there's the name of the domain, demo domain, and then underneath that we have environment, deployments, services, security realms, interoperability, and diagnostics. It's here that you will access every configurable resource and setting from data sources and JMS destinations to deployed applications and logging settings. So throughout your time working in the admin console and for the rest of the lab, you'll see in the lab text where it says navigate to domain structure, environment, servers, and when we refer to domain structure, it's this widget here that we're referring to. And you can see under environment, we do have servers. This is where we would configure and create managed servers. Under clusters, we can create clusters and manage those here and monitor those as well. So under domain structure, under environment and servers, you can see when I click on servers that there's a table that contains all the servers that are in this domain. And right now we only have the admin server. Future labs will create many more managed servers. But the way WebLogic displays resources and how you can view their configuration and monitor them is consistent across the various types of resources. And when I say resources, I'm referring to WebLogic servers, data sources, JMS, machines, virtual hosts, work managers, anything that can be created and configured within WebLogic, I'm calling a resource for simplicity. So if I click on admin server here in this table, you can see that I now have many tabs and subtabs for the admin server's configuration page. Under the main configuration tab, there are multiple subtabs: general, cluster, services, key stores, so on and so forth. If I click on another tab, protocols, it changes. So aside from servers, you can configure clusters. There's a separate lecture, lecture in this course that will go over clusters in some detail. Coherence clusters, machines, virtual hosts. Feel free to navigate this and explore. But the one area that I do want to focus on right now is this services section. Under services is where we can configure the JMS and data sources. These are the two most common resources that you would configure in a domain. And from an application standpoint, scroll back up here, we have deployments. Now, deployment is an application that's been deployed to WebLogic. And you can see here that in the deployments table, there are buttons for installing, updating, deleting, starting, and stopping. So future labs in this course will go over how to do all this, and we'll be coming back to this portion of the admin console to do that, to perform those actions. So I now want to focus on the How Do I widget down here. The How Do I widget provides some online help links to common tasks based on where you are within that console. This is very convenient if you're not very familiar with the admin console or you're not quite sure how to perform a certain action. So since we've clicked on deployments and we're looking at the main deployment page, the How Do I has been tailored to tasks that you would normally perform related to deployments. So you can see here the first one is install an enterprise application. The second one is configure an enterprise application. And if I click on any one of these, it's going to pop up online help. It's very convenient, very context sensitive help in the sense that it will provide common help links based on where you are within that console. Let's go ahead and close this. Now, there's general help as well. There's a help button up here that you can click on, and it provides help related to where you are as well. But you can see the contents hierarchy over here, and you can navigate and search and browse to the resources or tasks you're looking to perform. And lastly, system status. The system status just provides a snapshot of the health of all the WebLogic servers, including their states. So the default widget here shows the health of running servers, and we only have one running server, and that's the admin server, which is in an okay state, which is good. If it had failed, or if we had a managed server that had failed, if the admin server had failed, we wouldn't be logged into the admin console, we wouldn't see anything. If the managed server had failed, then we would see that noted here, or if, let's say, the server ran out of memory, we would see that it would be in a critical or overloaded state. And you can click on any one of these to dive in further. And so by clicking on that OK link, it's taken me to, you can see that it's taken me to the monitoring tab under the demo domain. And if I had other additional servers in this domain, you would see them listed here. So I can click on this server and I can see all the various subsystems that have been configured for this admin server. So moving on, from a navigation perspective, there is a main menu, or a main menu bar, I should say, at the very top. We have home, log out, preferences. You can set preferences for the look and feel and how the admin console functions. A record button for recording your actions and dumping them to a script. And that may not make sense now, but there's a lab dedicated to WebLogic scripting tool, and we will cover the record feature there. And as I mentioned, there's help, and there's also a search capability. But beneath that is the breadcrumb trail for navigation. There are times where you're navigating the domain structure and you're navigating and drilling down into a resource and you're clicking tabs and subtabs. There's not really a good way to go back. You can hit the back button WebLogic, but I don't really recommend it, especially if you're editing fields on a form for a given resource. So use the OK, cancel, next, finish buttons that you'll typically see, at the bottom of a page. However, if you're not changing anything, or if you do need to browse or navigate backwards, use the breadcrumbs. So you can see here that the last place that we went was summary of deployments. And I can click on any one of these that take me back to a certain page. So I can go to summary of clusters, and now I'm on the clusters page. I can go to summary of servers, and now I'm on the servers page. This seems rather trivial now, but if you're modifying, a cluster and you're several tabs deep, configuring that cluster or even configuring security. Security is a big component of WebLogic and can be very complicated. So instead of getting lost, you can use the breadcrumbs to navigate your way back out without losing your editing session. Okay, and that's it for this quick overview on the admin console. This lab was intended just to get your feet wet and familiar with how to access the admin console, how to log in, and how to navigate around the console. So let's go ahead and log out of this and stay tuned for the next lecture on managed servers.